All right. Continuing in our discussion.
Okay.
Good morning. We are up to chapter 16.
Right.
And the theme, the flow of what we've been talking about till now is the Beinoni. After the first 10 chapters or so, the Alter Rabbi describes for us the internal battle of good and evil, and not good in the sense of sin versus not sin, but God versus not ungod. Godliness versus unholiness versus things that are not God, and every single decision that we make at every moment in our day is a battle. Am I going to dedicate, am I going to live this moment for God or not? And that is the battle between the animal soul and the godly soul. Out of that battle, there can be three outcomes. Out of the battle of the godly soul and the animal soul, there are three possible, general categories. There is the tzaddik, the righteous one, the rasha, the quote-unquote wicked one, or as we like to call it, the one who falls, the one who fails sometimes, and the Beinoni, the intermediate, or as we like to call it, the regular person, the you and I's of the world.
Right.
However, even within these levels, even within these three options, there are many, many different levels. Yes, the tzaddik completely conquers his animal soul. It's gone, it's done, it's gone. The question is, how much of an effect did it leave? Of an effect did it leave? Okay. Does the tzaddik still feel repulsed by evil, right? So if we are completely only filled with love for someone, right. There's many ways we can be filled with that love. Some people, we love them so dearly and so completely that if anybody criticizes them, we take personal offense. Other people, I love them dearly, but if someone criticizes them, I wouldn't agree, I wouldn't pile on, I would defend them, but in my heart of hearts, maybe I'm nodding along that, yeah, that's something that guy could fix. And that is different levels of the tzaddik. In the rasha, there are also different levels. Because a rasha, again, is someone who slips up even once. Even one moment, it means he's not completely in control. It means that he does not have the full rulership over his little body, over his little city, as we call the body. That there is some moment or some idea or some sin or some fraction of a sin that the animal soul is in charge. And then we have the Beinoni. The Beinoni still 100% has the animal soul. It's alive and well and kicking and screaming. However, he never ever fails. He never gives into it. And as we discussed in last week's chapter, in chapter 15, sometimes that's because he's just naturally born that way. Right? Some people are just born. They're not very hot-blooded. They're not very tempted. They're not very excited about things, and so they can coast through life, as it were, just never giving into the animal soul. It's just never powerful enough to actually make a difference. On the other hand, that is that we call the Beinoni, which does not serve God, or as we mixed it up a little bit, who serves God not. His life is not filled with service of God because he's not constantly battling and fighting to stay above water. But then we have the one who serves God, the Beinoni who goes that extra mile, the Beinoni who is 100% fighting for his life, never to ever slip up, even in the minutest way. And here in chapter 16, the Alter Rabbi discusses how in the world is that possible? How is it possible for the Beinoni to constantly succeed? How is it possible for it to go? And how is it possible for him to be victorious day in, day out, big sins, small sins, right? Because the temptation is there. How is it possible for that to happen? So continue starting on page 1. Chapter 16, V'zeh klal gadol b'avedas l'Beinoni. This then is the important principle regarding the divine service of the Beinoni. Ha'ikr, hu limshol v'lishlit al teva shebachol hasmali. The essential thing is to govern and rule the nature that is the left part of the heart. You have to just be in control. As we discussed in the beginning, there's the right side of the heart and the left side of the heart. The left side of the heart is where the animal soul lives. Now, how can you be in control? Yes, it's easy to say mind over matter and just say no and all the other slogans that we've been saying. But practically speaking, how is that possible? How is it possible to not give in, to be in 100% control over your emotions? By the means of the divine light that illuminates the divine soul abiding in the brain. L'shlit al halev. To rule the desires of the heart. The only way to guarantee your safety, the only way to guarantee that it will work out, is if you channel the divine light, if you channel God's help, if you channel the divine reality, the godly reality into your mind, then your mind can control the heart. Continuing on page 2. This mastery of one's nature and desire is achieved when he meditates in his mind on the greatness of the blessed infinite God, so as to create, through his understanding, a spirit of knowledge and fear of God in his mind. The answer, the key to being a Beinoni is meditation, is thinking, is learning, is understanding, is comprehending godliness. And by understanding godliness, and if we fully in the Alter Rebbe later on in the chapter is going to give some examples of this, of what kind of meditation are we talking about, what kind of discussions are we talking about. But the idea is that by fully comprehending and meditating on the greatness of God, automatically this knowledge and fear will cause him to turn away from the evil condemned by the Torah or by our sages, even from a minor rabbinic prohibition, heaven forbid. Contemplating on God's greatness will bring about also a love of God, which will reveal itself in the right part of his heart, the seat of the godly soul, emotional faculties. Morning.
Morning.
With a longing and desire to cleave to him by fulfilling the precepts of the Torah and of the rabbis and study Torah which comes of all. So to quickly catch you up, we are discussing the Beinoni.
Yes.
How is it possible for a Beinoni to actually do his thing? The whole idea of a Beinoni is that day in, day out, every single day, every single sin, every temptation, he is victorious. The temptations are there. The struggle is there. So how is he victorious? And so the Alter Rebbe starts on page 1 and 2 of this chapter. The Alter Rebbe describes the process by which a Beinoni meditates about God. The more the Beinoni sits and meditates and contemplates and understands about God, naturally, he'll come to love God, he'll come to fear God. And when you love and fear God, if you love God, you'll do what God wants you to do. If you fear God, you won't do what God doesn't want you to do, even in the tiniest extent. So the way that the Beinoni is successful, at least as of now, on the next page, Alter Rebbe is going to completely change this a little bit. Going to get more realistic, if we can say that. But the ideal version of a Beinoni is someone who, yes, he struggles, he has a temptation. However, he, in his mind, he is filled with a love and a fear of God. How can you create a love and fear of God? Through meditation. Through understanding the process of wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Of thinking about something about God. Fully contemplating that. Let's take a very, very narrow example about God. God created the world. Right? I understand that in theory. Then I think and I look around and everything in this world that tempts me, everything in the world that excites me, who really created it? God. Which means that if God created it, I should be desiring God. I should be yearning for God. Really, everything that I like is just another manifestation of godliness. So what do I really like? God. Everything that God has done for me, everything God does for me, every part of my life that God does. Also, on the other hand, God is this incredibly powerful entity. I can't even comprehend, but I start thinking about it. What am I scared of in life? Right? They say the joke about some of the yeshiva students were very, very afraid of their teacher. And so they were teasing each other, saying, you're afraid of the teacher? The teacher is afraid of his wife. His wife is afraid of the mouse. So really, you're afraid of a mouse, right? What frightens me in this world? What am I scared of? I'm scared of, things going wrongly. I'm thinking of messing up. I'm afraid of losing what I have. Who's ultimately responsible for that? God. Which means I'm really afraid, or I should be afraid, of God. That's chachma and bina. And then we have the most important step, which is das. The idea of das is internalizing it, making it real. Right? In the Torah, the euphemism for marriage, for living together as husband and wife, is das. V'adam yada es chava. Right? Adam knew Eve. What does it mean he knew Eve? It's a euphemism for them consummating the relationship. Why is that what we're talking about it? Why is that the way that we talk about it? Because the idea of making it real, making it one, making it your reality. And the example, the mashal, that we give for this about knowing something in theory and making it real is in the old shtetl. I think I've said this in the past, but in the old shtetl, not everyone was literate. The one person who was definitely literate was always the malamed, the traveling teacher who would come into a village for a couple of months, teach all the kids to daven, to learn, to do basic things, and then he would move on. One time, one of the townspeople gets a letter. Doesn't know how to read it, so he takes it to the malamed and he gives it to him, and he asks the malamed to read it out loud. So the malamed starts reading about how in the city, Baruch passes away. Suddenly, the recipient of the letter falls into a faint. He collapses. Why did he collapse? That's my father. He passed away. So now, someone was trying to figure out, and so he turns to the malamed, turns to the teacher, and says, I don't understand. You're 1 degree closer to the information, right? You actually read the letter. You saw the fact, you saw the details. You knew it first. Why didn't you collapse? Right? Very simple. It's not my information. For me, it's hypothetical, it's abstract. For him, it was his father. And that's the difference of having das and not having das. Of, yes, I can think about God all day long, but making it real to me, making it, this is my God and my reality and my cup of coffee, that is a tremendous leap. That is a tremendous amount of work to sit and to meditate. But when I have that, when the Beinoni has that, if a Beinoni is able to lock that down, and through his meditation, he's able to get to a point where he has the chachma, the bina, and the das to make it real, that automatically gives him love of God and fear of God that will make that he can always overpower his animal soul. The animal soul wants him not to do a mitzvah. His love of God is way too strong to not do a mitzvah. The animal soul wants him to sin. His fear of God, and again, fear can be many levels. Fear could be that I'm afraid that God will punish me. Fear should be used in an understanding that I'm in awe. I am so in awe. I am so just in complete in a state of nullified. I'm completely nothing compared to God. How can I go against what God doesn't want me to do? I'm in awe of Him. That is, in theory, how it should work. That is a great idea. Which, by the way, these couple of lines really sums up the philosophy of Chabad. The name Chabad. What does it come from? Chabad, we're called Chabad Lubavitch. These days, those names are synonymous because the only sect within the Chabad movement is Lubavitch. It used to be there are other ones, but from the Alter Rebbe, because of Holocaust and Soviet and all the other things that have happened, Lubavitch is the only sect of Chabad Hasidim. But really, Lubavitch is the name of a town that a dynasty developed in. Chabad is a philosophy. Chabad is this philosophy of going from Chachma, Bina, and Das. Our philosophy, as stated here by the Alter Rebbe, is that our way, our method of serving God, it has to start intellectually. Because if I try to serve God without an emotion, without love and fear, we discussed this a million years ago when we were starting the Tanya, right? The only way to truly, long-term, consistently do something is to be motivated by either love or fear. That's the only ways that I can guarantee something will happen, right? If I can tolerate doing something, not doing something short-term. But if you want the Beinoni to be successful, if you want that for the 80 or 90 or 120 years that the Beinoni lives on this world, every single day he's successful, there are only two ways of doing that: love and fear. Eventually, everything else fizzles out. Eventually, the temptation will be too strong. And therefore, the Chabad, as opposed to Chagas, which is most other sects of Hasidic Judaism, is much more of a focus on the emotional part. Getting inspired, getting sort of assumed into the love and fear on its own. And they have their method, and we're not here to one over the other, but as a Chabad Chassid, we're learning the Chabad philosophy. That it has to start intellectually. I have to inspire myself, right? Because even love and fear, if I just, I have love and fear, which Alter Rebbe is going to talk about a little bit later, about how every Jew has an innate love and fear of God. But trying to tap into that on a regular basis, it might work short term. But if I don't consistently power it, if I don't consistently motivate it, if I don't consistently inspire it by meditation, eventually it fizzles out. And this goes back to the Sharblat, to the introductory page to the Tanya that we learned before we started chapter 1, where the Alter Rebbe said that this book is to teach you in a derech arucha uktsara, in a long and short way. What is a long and short way? So we explained in our first class. Long and short way, there's two ways you can get to a destination, right? One is a short way, right? As the crow flies, it's very short, but it's long because you have to go up the mountain and down the mountain and through the bushes and scratch yourself, and it takes you much longer. So it's a short way, but it's much harder. On the other hand, now we have the long but short way. Yes, it's much longer. It takes a lot more work and effort and years of meditating and training ourselves to get to that point. But it's shorter. It's a direct path. It's paved, it's plowed, it's ready to go. And that is what the Chabad philosophy is. This idea of starting off at meditation, thinking about God, reflecting about God, making it real to us. This is not some abstract understanding. This is my God. This is my life. And that inspires love and fear that can completely allow the Beinoni to consistently overcome.
Beinoni concept is that at some point in life, he's a Beinoni because he just did the right thing. But some other times in his life, he's not a Beinoni. Or is a Beinoni always a Beinoni?
So this is one of the big questions about Tanya, just to sum up your question. Is a Beinoni always a Beinoni, or can a Beinoni, sometimes he's a Beinoni, sometimes he's not? From the Tanya itself, it seems like a Beinoni is a lifelong idea. That the Alter Rebbe even used the words. He has never sinned and he will never sin.
So he becomes a tzaddik then.
But he still has a temptation. He's not a tzaddik. A tzaddik has no temptation.
Right.
A tzaddik, Len's not here to argue the free choice angle. But usually, right, a tzaddik doesn't have the struggles that we have. When I wake up in the morning and I really want to go rob a bank, a tzaddik doesn't have that temptation. I, as a hopeful Beinoni, I have the temptation, but I overpower it. How do I overpower it? Now, I will also say, because you asked, the Rebbe does expound on this idea further and says that a Beinoni, does that mean I sinned when I was 13 years old and suddenly I can never be a Beinoni? And the answer is no. It is still possible to be a Beinoni. We're talking about a shift in mindset. The way I am right now, I am so in control of my thought, deeds, and action, I would have never sinned if I always had this, and I will never sin if I'm able to keep this up. Unfortunately, I'm a human, and most of us sort of hover between Beinoni and not Beinoni. But there's another thing as well, which is that even within Beinoni, the fact that I don't sin, is that because technically I'm not sinning? Right? Using my example. If I woke up this morning and I want to go rob a bank, so I didn't rob a bank, I'm a Beinoni. Maybe, that's true. But also, I'm not a violent person, I'm not a greedy person, I don't have access to, so I'm almost like by default a Beinoni. Yes, I had the temptation, but was it really a temptation? Was it really strong? And that's what we discussed last week in chapter 15, about that there are two types of Beinoni. There's a Beinoni that serves God, that it's a struggle, right? Because the temptation that I had for something else, right, was a lot stronger and a lot more real, and that was a real struggle to overcome. That's the Beinoni who serves God, who actively struggles for God. Then you have a Beinoni who doesn't struggle for God. Right? And then, this exists on the whole life. Certain people are just not very excited. They're not very, they're not very passionate. They're bookworms. So the fact that he's sitting and learning Torah a whole day, that's his default position, right? He doesn't have a big struggle to get to that point. Then you have someone else who's very passionate and very excited and very tempted, and they're sitting and learning Torah all day. One of them is struggling for God, serving God. One of them is not. They're both a Beinoni, technically. But here we're talking about, right, and also that applies for different parts of my life. Certain parts of my life, I'm a Beinoni by default. Certain parts of my life, I'm a Beinoni with a struggle. And what we're talking about in this chapter is how can I consider, when I have a struggle, when I'm going through day in, day out of life, trudging through the days, months, and years, and decades of my life, God willing, how can I consistently serve God? How can I consistently win that battle? What is the Beinoni's mindset? We spoke a lot about how the Beinoni, in this mindset, he's so locked down that he could never sin and would never sin. What is that mindset? That mindset is the love and fear of God that is inspired by his meditation, by his contemplation. The problem is, and here's where the chapter really gets interesting, is that this doesn't always work. In fact, I'm going to say for most of us, it almost definitely doesn't work. Either because we're on the journey there, right? My first day of meditating about God, I can't expect it to be a love and fear. I can't expect it to be completely in love and completely in awe of God on my first day. But even more than that, certain people, which it seems like these days most of us have this problem. no matter what I do, I can sit and contemplate and think about and I can understand intellectually that I should love and I should fear God, but I don't. What are you going to do? What can I do about it? It just isn't working. Right? My love of God, and here's the important point. It's not that I don't meditate. It's not that I forget about God. It's not I'm doing all the steps. I'm learning about God. I'm contemplating. I'm meditating. It's just not inspiring anything within me. What are you going to do? It's just not happening. And I think hopefully this analogy will work. We spoke about how in order to do something consistently, you have to either be motivated by love or by fear. There is another idea also, which is what the Alter Rebbe is discussing here, which is an intellectual love and fear. I understand intellectually that I should love God. I understand intellectually that I should fear God. But the actual emotions aren't coming. For example, some people work their entire life a 9 to 5. Do they love the company? No. Do they fear the boss? Are they coming to work every day because they're petrified of what the boss is going to do to them? No. They're not working out of love or out of fear. Then why for decades and decades and decades are they coming to work? Because intellectually they understand, I got to go to work so I have money so I can live, right? There's sort of an intellectual motivation. There's an intellectual emotion. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is going to introduce us here. That for many of us, no matter how long we sit and we meditate and we contemplate, it will always be an intellectual emotion. Now, I know those words out of context make no sense, because either it's intellectual, but we can all appreciate this idea about how I know that I should want to do something. My alarm is ringing. I have a very, very busy day. I have exciting stuff to do today. So sometimes those exciting stuff are so exciting that I jump out of bed and I'm ready to go. Sometimes those exciting things are exciting enough that I know I should get out of bed today. But am I actually excited to get out of bed? Am I actually excited to start my day? No. I should be. I know that this day is going to be fun and I know this, but I still want to sleep more. And that is sort of the reality for most Beinonis, is that although I think and I contemplate the emotion, and here's the important thing also. Yes, the Beinoni is successful. He's able to parlay this intellectual emotion into being successful because the opportunity comes to sin. He's offered the opportunity to rob a bank. Where does his mind go to? It says, really, I'd love to rob this bank. Between me and you, I love money a lot more than I love God. I'm sorry, that's just the reality. However, I also know that this is not something I should be doing. God doesn't want me to do this. And therefore, I don't want to do it. There's a beautiful, this idea of wanting to want something and how that is real. It's not maybe as real, it's not as powerful, but it's real. In the Chabad custom, we do not sleep in the sukkah. Many Jews have the custom, right? It says in the Torah, you should move in to your sukkah. For 7 days, the sukkah is where you live. So you eat, where you drink, where you sleep, where you hang out. However, Chabad, amongst all the other Jewish people that I know of, we do not sleep in the sukkah. We sleep in the house. And the question is why? And this is a hotly debated topic. But it boils down to the fact that the sukkah is a place of such incredible, intense spiritual energy that you can't sleep. If we try to sleep in the sukkah, it's like trying to sleep at a rock concert. It doesn't work. There's so much spirituality, so much going on, it wouldn't work. And that's why Chabad doesn't, because if someone is in pain in the sukkah, they don't have to be there. So trying to sleep in the sukkah would be painful, and therefore we don't sleep there. But that's not actually true. I'm a Chabad Chassid. I've never slept in the sukkah in my life. I also have never felt those spiritual energies. So for me, sitting in the sukkah, sleeping in the sukkah wouldn't actually be painful. Why don't I sleep in the sukkah? And that's where the Rabbi explains that, because for me, although it's not actually painful, the fact that it isn't painful itself is painful. Right? I know what I'm missing out on. Sitting in the sukkah, I am aware intellectually of what's going on. Do I feel it? No. But even that being aware intellectually, and also the fact that I'm missing out on it, that causes me to have pain. And that's why Chabad doesn't sleep in the sukkah. Again, a very different conversation. But we see again this idea of that, am I actually feeling pain? No. But intellectually I'm feeling pain. And that is the idea here as well, that there's another level and another idea, which the Alter Rebbe sort of almost has it as an aside. It seems like, the Alter Rebbe starts off chapter 16 with an idea that this is how a Beinoni works. You have the machshava, you have the chachma, bina that leads to das, and that inspires him with the love and the fear, and he's good to go. And here, almost as an afterthought, the Alter Rebbe throws in the main part of this chapter, and that is, what if it's not working? And this is continuing on page 3. The Yeser al Kain, Tzarech Leida Klal Gadol Ba'avodas Labeinanim. Furthermore, one must know an additional important principle in the Beinani service of God. Shagam im ein yad sichloi v'ruach b'nasim aseges lahilid avos Hashem b'izgalus libay. Even if one's intellect and understanding are incapable of producing a revealed love for God in his heart, shia libe boyer kiddush be'eis v'chafetz b'chafetz chasheka ksuka murgeshes b'levo davkavay, to make it burn as it ought, with fiery flames, with a desire and a longing and a passion manifestly felt in the heart, to cleave to God. Instead, this heart is hidden in his mind and in the recesses of his heart. It's there, it's hidden. But I don't actually feel the passion. Intellectually, I have passion. Intellectually, I understand why I should have passion, but the passion isn't there. The next paragraph is a note. In the original copy, this is a shaded box. It's called a Haggah. Where the Alter Rebbe sometimes would infuse some why does this happen? Why is it that for some Beinanis don't they feel the passion never comes? Right? For some, it's a journey and they're not there yet. But for most, it just doesn't come. Why not? So in this paragraph, the Alter Rebbe talks about the Kabbalistical source of the soul, and I'll explain the idea very quickly. If you want to understand more, I'm happy to talk about it after. There's also on the top of page 4 a long paragraph that discusses it. But very, very basically, this idea of thought, of machshava, of chachma and bina, giving birth to emotions, is a mirror of how it works by God, and exactly how it works and what the emotions are. Right? But God also has the idea of some sort of wisdom, some sort of understanding that creates God's emotional attributes, the sphirot. That process actually has a step in between, which we might compare to a pregnancy, where the child, the fetus is created, but it's hidden. Some souls come from that point, come from the point of pregnancy. They don't come from later when the emotions are actually created, when the attributes and the sphirot are actually created. They come from the point of pregnancy. And souls that come from the point of pregnancy, just like pregnancy, the fetus is there, it's just hidden, right? You can see the shape, but you don't see the actual fetus. So too, those souls will have the emotions, but it's hidden, it never comes out, it never fully... We'll read that inside. Again, it's very Kabbalistical, and so don't let that derail the rest of our discussion. On the bottom of page 3, the reason for this inhibition is that this person's intellect and nefesh, ruach, and neshama derive from the so-called ibur, conception and concealment within the supernal understanding, and not from the stage of leda, birth, and revelation, as is known to students of Kabbalah. As we are not students of Kabbalah, we'll leave it there. Don't worry about that too much. However, the reality we have to worry about a lot. The reality is that I've been meditating and thinking about God for the last 65 years, and it's just not creating an emotional response. I understand intellectually why I should be emotional, as the Alter Rebbe continues on page 4.
Now, is there any instructions on this meditation as to what it is? I mean, maybe the Siddur, or is that...
We're going to discuss in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe is going to give us a sample.
Okay.
Absolutely, because so far we've been very vague about what exactly is he meditating about. So the Alter Rebbe discusses now, again on page 4, this means that the heart comprehends with the spirit of wisdom and understanding in the brain. Right? He understands. I.e., instead of being excited with the love of God as he ought to be, the heart merely experiences an understanding of Gedulas ein Sof Baruch Hu D'chula Kamei Kolo Chshev Mamish, the greatness of the blessed infinite God before whom all else is not. Right? So, starting from that line that we just read, this is what the Beinani's heart this is what he understands. In some Beinanis, this understanding leads to a passionate fire. In this Beinani, he understands it, even if it's going anywhere. What does he understand? God, and I'm going to say words now that we take a lifetime to meditate about. God is so incredibly beyond anything that we can comprehend that if we look around the world, right, what's the difference between the net worth, my net worth, and the net worth of someone that's worth $500 million? About $500 million, right? Because my numbers are so small and insignificant compared to that massive number that it's a rounding error. Right? That's what we call it these days. It's a rounding error. That's the way this entire universe, our entire existence, and everything that we experience is not even a rounding error compared to God himself. God himself is so beyond everything, right? Our entire relationship with God revolves around God and his creation and relationship with the world. From God's perspective, that entire relationship and everything is almost nothing, right? If you have one employee in Walmart, a bajillion-dollar company that employs hundreds of thousands of people. So from Walmart's perspective, one employee, it's nothing. It doesn't even show up on a balance sheet. It doesn't show up, you have to go to 3 sub-menus to actually find that employee's information. Right? From Walmart's perspective, the employee is nothing. He's there. This is where it breaks down, because obviously for Walmart understands that, yes, their business, every individual worker is nothing, but hundreds of thousands of workers together create their store. With God, it's not even like that. Right? Now, from the Walmart employee's perspective, Walmart is everything. Walmart is where they work. Walmart is where they get money from. Walmart is everything. From Walmart corporate's perspective, the employee is nothing. That is even less of how than we else with God. From our perspective, God is our everything. God is complete. God's creation of the world created our whole reality. From God's perspective, it's nothing. Completely, absolutely nothing.
Individual is nothing, you're saying?
So here's where it gets a little delicate, because we're not at all saying that God doesn't value what we do. Right? God doesn't appreciate, or God doesn't care about what we do, because the whole point of why God created us is because he does care about what we do. But value-wise, right? Value is a hard word to put out there, but greatness-wise. God's greatness, God's immenseness, God's power, God's everything is so much more, so much bigger, that every individual item is as if nothing. It's not even a rounding error. Right? So now, part of the miracle, and we've discussed this in the past, is that God chooses to care about what one little schnunky Jew is doing in Reno. That's God's choice. But from a greatness perspective, from a value perspective, not only does God, God, not only is that one person not worth anything, the entire Reno, the entire world, the entire universe is worth nothing, is valueless, is completely nullified towards him. Everything, our entire reality, is not even a rounding error. That's how great God is. On page 4 again, the greatness of the blessed infinite God before whom all is not. For which reason it is fitting and due unto him, blessed be he, that the soul of every living thing should pine for him, to cleave to and become absorbed in his divine light. Because of God's incredible greatness, the reality is that we should be seeking God. Right? We can use a modern day example of this for those that are following the war that's going on. Right? One of the weapons against an airplane, a fighter jet, is a heat-seeking missile. Because if you look at the sky and there's a jet engine in the middle of the sky, that's the hottest thing there. So the heat-seeking missile finds the hottest thing and goes towards that. What does a pilot do to get out of that? Turns towards the sun. Because if the missile is looking at the airplane and at the sun, it's going to go, what's the hottest thing in the sky?
Sun.
The sun, by far. And that's one of the ways, at least at one point, I don't know, these days they're more advanced, but in theory, that's a way to defeat a heat-seeking missile. So if we imagine our emotions, our desires as a heat-seeking missile, I should desire a piece of cake. I should desire something like that. When there's God, when God exists, God's incredible immenseness is so beyond anything in this world. How can I possibly desire anything small? Now, again, this is what the Beinoni understands. And even that is a long stage, right, to really fully internalize this. The problem is that you could think about that for 40 years and still desire the piece of cake. It's just the human reality of who we are, whether because of where our soul comes from or just in general. That's what it means to be human in this world. I can understand intellectually how great God is and how I should really only be pining and yearning for God, and yet I still want the piece of cake. Continuing on page 5. It is likewise fitting, so this is continuing within the meditation of what the Beinoni is supposed to understand, even if he's not inspired. V'gam nafshe v'ruche shebekirbai kach It is likewise fitting for his own soul, the nefesh and ruach within him, to languish for him, meaning with God, with a fervent desire to leave their sheath, i.e. the body, which surrounds and conceals the soul like a sheath in order to give them. My soul should be so yearning and so pulled towards God, it should be pulled out of my body. Really, the fact that my soul is still living in my body is almost like problematic. My soul should be returning to God. My soul, if my soul is a heat-seeking missile, it should be shooting out of my body, going back to its source in God. Rak, why isn't it?
Well, it's not a tangible object.
Also, because the body, my soul knows, my soul is limited by the fact that a soul, as holy as it is, requires a body in order to live, which is why when Mashiach comes, the body is going to get rewarded, because the body is the engine that powers the soul. And therefore, my soul physically can't leave, but it's stuck here. Continuing on page 5, it is so intensely, his thoughts continue, right? The Beinoni, again, this is all the things that the Beinoni is thinking about to inspire himself. So intensely should his nefesh and ruach long for God, that only against their will do they dwell in the body, and they are bound to it like deserted wives, literally living widows. This is a very sad reality, where especially in the olden days, people would go off to travel, or go off for business, or go off for war, and they would disappear. They would never heard from again. Now, their wives would love to move on, but they're not. They're living widows, right? Their husband may or may not be alive, but they're trapped in this marriage. It's a very tragic reality. Similarly, my soul is trapped in a relationship with the body. It wants to move on, it wants to go back to God, but it just can't. In their present state, their thoughts cannot grasp God at all, except when it grasps and invests itself in the Torah and its commandments. By studying the Torah and the commandments, one grasps God's will, which are one with God. My soul wants to turn to God. If my soul had a choice, it would rip out of my body and return to God. It can't. It's trapped. So what can my soul do? The only way my soul can actually experience this relationship with God, by doing Torah, by doing mitzvos, as illustrated by the one who embraces the king. That yes, I'm putting on tefillin, I'm putting on a piece of leather and a piece of parchment onto my hand, but ultimately that's the only way that my soul can experience godliness, and it's desperate to do that. My soul should be so pulled, my soul is so inspired, because of God's greatness, my soul is so pulled towards God that nothing can stand in its way. It needs to connect to God. It can't connect to God himself because it's trapped in a body. So it does Torah, it does mitzvahs, but it should be, people should be getting knocked over with the excitement that I've run to do a mitzvah.
Every soul is like that?
But at its core, yes. This is what should be happening. This page was just the Alter Rebbe describing the process. He described it in one page. This is a lifetime of contemplation. Because of how great God is, my soul is yearning to it like a heat-seeking missile. It's trapped in a body. So instead of running to God himself, I'm running to the Torah, I'm running to learn something, I'm running to do a mitzvah, I'm running away from an avera because of the excitement. However, as much as the Beinoni sits and contemplates and even understands intellectually these ideas, continuing on page 6, it is therefore fitting and proper for his nefesh, still within the meditation, is therefore fitting and proper for him to embrace God with all their heart, soul, and might. This means, in a practical sense, to fulfill the 613 commandments in act, speech, and thought, the thought being the comprehension and knowledge of the Torah, as explained above in the previous chapter. That through Torah and the commandments, one grasps God himself, so to speak. Here again, we're unpacking this idea that the soul, the Beinoni can understand intellectually that I should be so full of love of God that I'm running to do every mitzvah. That's what should be happening. And the Beinoni understands it, and he's been meditating about it, and it's intellectually he's there. And if that works, continuing on the bottom, on the second half of page 6, consequently, when the Beinoni ponders this subject in the recesses of his heart and mind's understanding, and his mouth and heart are in accord, i.e. what his heart feels finds full expression in his speech, right? It's developing. That he's thinking about these ideas, he internalized them intellectually, so he starts to talk about them and pray about them and learn about them with his mouth. In that he fulfills with his mouth the resolve of his mind and heart's understanding. Namely, to direct a desire towards God's Torah, meditating on it day and night in oral study. That's the big thing. That's how the main mitzvahs that we do with our mouth are prayer, but even more importantly, actually saying the words of Torah as well. V'chein on page 7. And when his hands and other bodily organs too carry out the commandments as is resolved in his mind and heart's understanding. Then, when he implements this resolution, this tevuna, the intellectual emotion, which cannot properly be called love and fear, but tevuna, literally understanding, is closed in the act, speech, and thought of the Torah and His commandments, providing them with the intellectual power, vitality, and wings to enable them to soar on high. This is where the Alter Rebbe discusses the reality of most of us. Am I filled with a fiery passion towards God that actually pulls me to do every single mitzvah? No. But I understand intellectually that I should be. And therefore, intellectually I know, what should I be doing right now? Learning Torah. So I sit down and start reading Torah. Intellectually I know, what should I be doing now? And it's not just a knowledge, but intellectually I know I should have a passion for learning Torah. Intellectually I know that I should have a passion for doing a mitzvah. And therefore I do it. Right? And that's a challenge of the Beinoni, that even though he's struggling, but he knows it and he does it. Because a Beinoni at the end of the day is someone who is in control. His mind is in control of his heart. The best way to do that is that your mind creates such a powerful emotion that your heart, you overcome your other emotions and you overcome your other desires. But for your average Beinoni, that doesn't work. And so again, we have to sort of skip a step. For him, which means for us, we sort of have to usually skip that passion. So instead, what do I have? I have a passionate understanding, I have an intellectual emotion, and that enables me, and that inspires me to do something. When this Beinoni is sitting and learning Torah, is he filled with a passionate desire to connect to God? No. But he's filled with an understanding that I should have a passionate desire, and that is pushing me to go learn Torah. Just like the person who goes to work every single day, not because he loves his job, not because he's petrified of his boss, but because intellectually he knows that if he gets fired, ... And therefore he goes. Right? Or with a job, it's depending on what the person's job is. Even if a person isn't passionate about something, to doing important work, intellectually they know this is really, really important, that has to happen. And therefore I'm going to go into work every day. That is the reality of the Beinoni. He doesn't have that passion. It just doesn't work. It's not kindling that passion. And so instead he has what we're calling the intellectual passion, the intellectual emotion. But here's an important thing also. In Judaism, when we do a Torah and mitzvos, we create a being, we create an angel, we create something. But those have to go up. Those have to fly up to God. Those have to go up to their source. They have to go do stuff. How do they fly up? With wings. What are the wings of a mitzvah? The passion. A mitzvah that's done without passion, right? A mitzvah that's done out of habit, or a mitzvah that's done because, whatever. The mitzvah's there. It's a good deed. You did it. But for it to go up, for it to fly up, whatever that means for a mitzvah to fly up, which we'll discuss a little bit, but for the mitzvah to fly, it needs wings. What are the wings? Passion. For those that saw it when you came in downstairs, we're still cleaning up from Perm. Right? So they did the Arctic here, so you saw some penguins on the stairs. Penguins have wings, but they don't work. And therefore, can penguins fly? No. A penguin, right, doesn't have working wings, and when we do a mitzvah without passion, it also doesn't have working wings. So is this Beinoni stuck? Right? There's a great story of the Baal Shem Tov, that he walked into a synagogue, to a shul, a German Yeke, for those that know what Yeke means. It's a very, very strict, very God-fearing Jews, but very, very exact, without any passion, without any emotion. They're clear-cut German efficiency. The Baal Shem Tov walked into a synagogue and he mentioned, wow, this place is so amazing. This place is filled with Torah and mitzvos. They thought that was a great compliment. For a synagogue, for a shul, to be filled with Torah and mitzvos is great. Later on he explained he didn't mean it as a compliment. Because if the shul is full of Torah and mitzvos, that means none of it was able to ascend. None was able to go up. Because none of it had wings, none of it had passion. The Torah and mitzvos is there, but the passion was missing. So does this Beinoni not have any, if he can't conjure up the passion, then what? And here the Alter Rebbe says, don't worry. That intellectual passion, that also works as a passion. As he continues, as we just read, wings, enabling them to soar on high. Continuing on page 7, the love and fear referred to as tevuna, although not heartfelt emotions, nevertheless serve as wings for Torah and mitzvos in the same ways if you practice them with real fear and love as revealed in the heart. Now, how do I know that I didn't actually have that real, what's the difference between real love and fear and tevuna? Tevuna means understanding, right? Intellectual love and fear. What's the difference? So he continues in the brackets. In which case, he would have performed them with a desire, fervor, and passion that is felt in the heart and soul, thirsting for God due to the flaming love of God in his heart, as explained above. That is the reveal, that's the open, that's the real passionate love. Does this Beinoni have that? No, that never worked. That never got inspired. What does he have? He has the intellectual love and fear. That intellectual love and fear can also work as wings to bring up his mitzvot above.
Instead of passion.
Instead of real, the Alter Rebbe uses these words, so that's why I feel comfortable using them. You have real passion and you have intellectual passion. That's the difference of going to your volunteering job that you love to do and you love to whatever it is, and going to your 9 to 5. That do you love filling in spreadsheets? No. But you understand intellectually that this is very important for you to do, so you have money that you can do other things. Are they both passion? No. One's real passion and one's fake passion. But for the Beinoni, especially because we're talking about spiritual things here, we're talking about a love of God and a fear of God, God makes it work. Continuing on page 8. Why do I get credit for that passion, even if it's not real? Because at the end of the day, that passion made me do this mitzvah. Even if it's not real passion, it still pushed me towards this. For it is this tvuna in his mind and in the recesses of his heart that lead him to engage in the Torah and mitzvahs as explained above. The luloi shahayim misbeinin b'tvuna zu lo ya'asik behem klal elo tzarchei guf levad. Had he not meditated on this tvuna, again, tvuna is sort of this middle intellectual passion that we're using this. It's not nothing, right? It's not just intellect, but it's also not real passion. So we're using this word tvuna as sort of an intellectual passion. He would not have occupied himself with them at all, but with his physical needs alone. Because even if he is an assiduous student by nature, nevertheless he naturally loves his body more. How do I know that there is a passion here, even if it's fake? Because I'm doing things I would not have otherwise done. I would not have woken up this morning and put on tefillin if not for my love of God. Now, is it a real fiery, did I run out of my bed and put on tefillin first thing? No, because it's not a real passion. But the fact that I do put on tefillin is because intellectually I have that passion. Therefore I get credit for that passion because it pushed me to do something I would not have otherwise done. If I didn't have any of the passion, if I didn't have this mind passion, if I didn't have this logical conclusion of, well, I should be excited to do a mitzvah, I wouldn't have done the mitzvah at all. Therefore I get credit for it. Continuing on page 8, V'zer Ramzu Razal, our sages of us have hinted to this principle here, but Amra Machshava Teva Kadosh Baruch Hu Mitzar L'Maisa. When they said the Holy One, blessed be, joins a good thought to a deed. There's a saying in the Talmud that God connects. If you had a good intention, God connects it to a good deed. Now, what does that mean simply? The Rebbe continues. The simple meaning of that is that if you intended to do a mitzvah and then it didn't happen, right? Somebody intended to give charity, but then lost their money. And it wasn't just in theory. They really, really intended to do it. Somebody intended to give a sandwich to a poor person, but the sandwich got lost. And they really, really intended to do the mitzvah. Our sages tell us God considers it as if you did the mitzvah. You get credit for the mitzvah even if the opportunity disappeared. Machshava Tova, a good thought, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzarfa L'maaseh, God connects it with a good deed. Now, the actual language that's used is mitzarfa. God connects it with a good deed. That doesn't really fit with the simple translation that I just said, right? It should have said, Alter Rebbe continues, V'havali l'meimer, ma'ila alava kasuv ki'ilu asa. The simple meaning of the phrase, that when one intends to do a mitzvah but is prevented from doing so, God ascribes it to him, though he had actually performed it, warrants the expression, Torah considers it. Why does it say, right, as though he had actually done it? Instead of using the word Torah considers it, we use the word Torah connects it. Continuing on page 9, Allah Inyan, the explanation, however, lies in the previous mentioned principle, it is the revealed fear and love of God in the heart that vest themselves in one's performance of the commandments, giving them vitality to soar on high. For the heart is also corporeal, just like other organs of the body, which are instruments of action. When we say Machshava Tova HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzarfa L'maaseh, that when I have a good thought, even if it's not a good emotion, right? I don't have the passion, but I have the good machshava. I thought about the right things, and therefore I did the mitzvah. God connects it. God sort of, does a transplant and transplants those emotions onto the mitzvah. He puts wings on the mitzvah. He takes my good thought, which isn't a real passion. It's not real, it's not natural wings for this mitzvah, but God connects them. I just will mention quickly that the Rabbi takes it a step further and explains that there is a way how do we understand, right? Why did the sages use such a weird terminology of God connects it with a good deed? Even in the simple meaning, Machshava Tova, if you intend to do a mitzvah, and circumstances change, the opportunity was lost, or whatever it is, to no fault of your own, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mitzarfa L'maaseh, God will eventually connect you to do that mitzvah again. That opportunity will come back up with you. Someone who really, really intends to give charity, to do a mitzvah, or to whatever the story is, the opportunity was lost. They couldn't do it in the end. God will always circle back and make sure you have the opportunity to do that mitzvah. That's where the Rabbi explains the simple meaning. But the Alter Rebbe here is taking it a step further. So when you have a completely different understanding, when you have a machshava tova, when you have a good thought process, even if it didn't create natural, fiery passion, God connects them. Why? Because where does this passion live? In your heart. Your heart is a physical organ.
If you forgot, it also counts.
Yes, if it's
purposely.
Yes. 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 The heart is, however, in the internal and the organ source of vitality. Therefore, because the heart, in its corporality, is close to the other organs and also provides their vitality, it can close itself with their actions, be their wings, and elevate them. And that is the process by which this happens.
On that same thought,
Yes.
if you're not capable of doing it, but then if you want to do it, but you don't have the means to do it, is that?
That's exactly what we're talking about here. Right? The Rebbe would talk about this at length, especially when it comes to charity. The Rebbe would say, have in your mind that you're going to give actually telling a synagogue, actually pledging is maybe a step, because if they're relying on the pledge, that could be a thing. But the Rebbe would say, don't limit yourself and don't limit God. You plan to give a tremendous amount of money. And if you really mean it, and God will make it happen. God will work out that, we're just talking about how great God is. For God, the difference between you having $100 or $100 million, for God is nothing. So if you really intend to give all the money to charity or use it for good things, God will figure out the rest. Absolutely. Even if I don't have the opportunity as of now, I should work towards them. Continuing on page 10. However, the aforementioned fear and love that are in the intelligence of the brain and the recesses of the heart are far higher order than the realm of action. Therefore, they cannot clothe themselves in the performance of the commandments to become their intellectual power and vitality, to elevate them so they may soar on high. Until the Alter Rebbe said, right, what's the wings that cause my mitzvos to go on high? The passion. Because passion is such a real, visceral thing that I feel. When I do a mitzvah with passion, it's a very different mitzvah, right? I can put on the same pair of tefillin. When it's being done with a real passion, you can't even compare. And therefore, because the passion is so close to the action, they all get bundled together and get flown up. But what if I don't have real passion? What if I just have intellectual passion? Does that work as well? So by default, it shouldn't work. Because my intellectual passion is so far removed from the action that I'm doing, it doesn't really change it, right? If I just intellectually, someone who's not really excited about their job, they're just doing it because intellectually they have a passion for getting a salary, you can see it in their job as well, right? They're doing it, but it's... And therefore, by default, this intellectual passion shouldn't work as wings and as wings to fly the mitzvah up. Why does it work? If not for the fact that God joins and unites them together with the action, so they may serve as the wings. They, the tevuna, fear and love, right, that intellectual passion, are called good thoughts, if they're not actual fear and love and revealed in the heart. But only in the intelligence of the brain and the recesses of the heart, as mentioned above, since they express themselves in the mind, they're called good thoughts. Right? So this is what the saying is. Good thoughts, you have a good machshava, you have an intellectual passion, but it's intellectual, which means by default, it should not have any bearing, it should not become a wing for my actions, but God connects them. He bridges that divide, that my intellectual passion can work as wings for my action itself, even though really it shouldn't.
Feeling obligated to do it is like intellectual.
What's the obligation coming from? Why do I feel obligated?
Knowing that you have to do it.
That's exactly what we're talking about here. Knowing that God wants me to do this, and I should be excited about what God wants me to do, but I'm not. God connects those and causes it to also work as a passion. This is, again, we're going to get a little Kabbalistical, so we'll learn through this a little bit quicker, because maybe next time around we'll focus more on the Kabbalistical side of the Tanya when we do this again. Thus, it is also written in the Zohar and Eitz Chaim that the Hebrew word tevuna, understanding, comprises the letter which form the word ben and bas and ben, son and daughter, which in terms of the human emotion represents love and fear, right? So it is possible to connect these ideas of tevuna, of the intellectual emotion, with ben and bas, the real passion emotions, as they're referred to in Kabbalah. Sometimes the tevuna descends to become the intelligence in the feminine aspect of the small image, i.e. the recipient of the divine midos or attributes which are referred to collectively as the small image, which in the human sphere refers to the letters of the Torah mitzvahs. Again, there's a long paragraph that discusses this. I'm continuing on page 12. And the initiated shall understand, i.e. the Kabbalah referring to the note, will be fully elucidated in the course of further study. In other words, if you don't get it, don't worry about it. God willing, as we, right, this is another one of those notes that the Alter Rebbe wrote on the side of the chapter, just to bring in some Kabbalistical concepts, but we'll gloss over that for now. Continuing on bottom of page 12, right? So God creates this union. God connects the intellectual passion with the action. But God affects the joining of this tevuna to action in order to elevate the performance of the commandments and the Torah study, which are carried out through the influence of the good thought, right? As Jacob just called it, that sense of that I need to do it, right? That I know that I have to do it. God takes that good thought, that knowledge that I have to do it, and converts that into wings to make the mitzvahs fly up to the world of Bria. Right? The world of Bria is one of the highest worlds. The world of Bria being the level to which ascends the performance of Torah and mitzvahs when motivated by a fear and love derived from one's meditation, which are truly revealed in one's heart. Right? God makes it happen that our Torah and mitzvahs go up to Bria, even if I didn't have the real passion emotion. On page 13, Avo b'lav hachi, nami elam le'elam hayitzira, yidi chilu rechimu tivim, hamishes b'lev kol yisrael b'todusim, k'mei yishbar l'kaman ba'aryocha. However, even without the joining, right, what if I don't have that passion? What if I'm doing a mitzvah simply because it's habit, or it's root, or it's just, I'm in a room where everyone else is doing it, so whatever, I might as well do it. Don't worry. The mitzvahs still have power, they still have flight. Why? However, even without this joining, they rise to the world of Yetzirah by the means of the natural fear and love which are latent in the hearts of all Jews from birth, as we'll explain later at length. This is a very, very powerful idea. The next topic, over the next couple of chapters, really a large portion of the rest of Tanya is going to talk about this idea, that we have a latent love and fear. Every single Jewish person, by nature, as part of our Jewish DNA, we have a passion to love in God. That's going to be a long discussion for the rest of Tanya. But for now, what do we learn in chapter 16? We learned the process by which a Beinoni can be successful. How is it possible to be a Beinoni? How is it possible that day in and day out, you defeat the battle, you win the war? You don't win the war, because winning the war would you destroy the animal soul. We're a Beinoni. It's one battle after another. That's our entire life. It is battle after battle after battle. How do you constantly win? So an ideal world is by meditation leads to a passion. A very strong, passionate love and fear of God. Unfortunately, that's not the reality for most of us. So at least, hopefully, it leads to an emotional passion, to an intellectual passion, and that's good enough, and that works, as we've just described at length. Shkoch. Thank you for coming.